Good morning, honorable members. As we begin our devotions with our Moments of Impact segment, I would like to share on this thought today. Jesus is the reason for the season. As we celebrate the Christmas season by spending time with family, adorning homes with lights and ornaments, eating our favorite foods, and while all of doing these things are great, it's important that we don't lose focus of the true meaning of this season. The world has commercialized this season and has removed the Christ out of Christmas and made it all about sales and not souls. During this time of the year, many are spending monies that they don't even have to buy gifts for loved ones and expecting to receive gifts in return. Let me emphatically state today that Christmas is not about buying or receiving gifts. Christmas is not about me, neither is it about you. It's not our birthday. Christmas is about the celebration of the birth of the Christ child who came into the world to save mankind from their sins. Matthew chapter 1 verse 21 says, "And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, and he shall save his people from their sins." Without the entrance of the Christ child into the world, mankind would be bound by sin and separated from God. John chapter 3 verse 16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." In my concluding thoughts, as the wise men brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh when they came to visit the Christ child, why don't you present Christ with the greatest gift of all, and that is your life? I want to encourage all of us, each of us this day, this Christmas, which by the way falls on a Sunday, to attend the church of your choice and give Almighty God praise for sending his Son into the world to redeem mankind. Because after all, Jesus is the reason for the season. Selah, think and act on these things. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for sending Jesus to earth to save us from our sins. Thank you for making a way to receive salvation. Thank you for not giving up on us and ensuring our eternal destination is secured. Lord, help us to not allow the commercialization of this season to cause us to miss the real reason for this season. Help us to always keep our focus on you and not be sidetracked by what is happening around us. Today, we boldly proclaim you as master and ruler of our lives. Lord, as these honorable members have assembled today to discuss the people's business, I pray that the love, joy, and peace that you've brought into the world will reside in this honorable house today and permeate the hearts of these your people. Oh Lord, bless this session today. Let your perfect will be done, and may you continue to lead our country to greater pastures. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let us repeat the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Philip Davis, Chester Cooper, Fred Mitchell, Gladys Hannah Martin, Obadiah Wilchcomb, Alfred Sayers, Dr. Michael Darville, Clay Sweeting, Keith Bell, Wayne Monroe, Vaughn Miller, Jobeth Colby Davis, Ginger Moxie, Mario Boleg, Jomo Campbell, Basil McIntosh, Miles LaRota, Pia Glover Rowe, Lisa Ramming, Zane Lightbourne, Dr. Hubert Minnis, Jamal Strawn, John Pinder, Marcus Rowe, Leon Lundy, Kirk Cornish, Wade Watson, Leonardo Lightbourne, Leslie Miller Bryce, Leroy Major, Sylvanius Petty, Michael Barnaby, Michael Pintard, James Kwesi Thompson, Aram Lewis, Shannon Don Cartwright, Adrian Gibson, Adrian White.
Good morning, honorable members. It's indeed a pleasure to be here this morning. And let us now go down the order of business. Communications by this, introduction and swearing of new members, laying of documents by ministers. No laying. Okay. Statements and communications by ministers. Thank you, honorable member. Communication by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motion for leave of absence, leave to resign, seat and new writs. Presentations of petitions. Presentations of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. Thank you, honorable member. Second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged
Thank you,
Island.
Madam Speaker. We're on a roll. It looks like it's going to be a good day.
It is a good day.
I stand on behalf of the wonderful people of Exuma, all 365 islands in the Exumas and Ragged Island, that I am so proud to represent. I'm particularly excited today, Madam Speaker, because we are here to debate legislation that has the capacity to dramatically alter the trajectory of our entire nation for generations. This bill is the enabling framework for enhancing and leveraging our assets for the benefit of the Bahamian people. It is transformational in that it will lay a foundation for public sector investing and reinvesting. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to be speaking today in the Prime Minister's stead to move the National Investment Funds Bill 2022. Our Prime Minister continued to blaze new trails at home and abroad on behalf of the Bahamian people, and we commend him. Madam Speaker, I congratulate the Prime Minister for the work put into this legislation. It is a reflection of his wisdom and leadership and the caliber of those he has chosen to help him govern this country. In this case, specifically the Attorney General and the Cabinet of the Bahamas that has worked diligently on this particular piece of legislation. During the last general election campaign, we promised to do big transformative things for the Bahamian people and not just nip around the edges of problems. It was our New Day campaign, Madam Speaker, and this legislation reflects the commitment to that promise. In terms of investment funds, I consider myself an expert in this field, having worked in the space for almost 10 years in 3 countries, the Bahamas, Ireland, and Luxembourg. And I don't say this for self-praise or to pat myself on the back, but I say it rather to give you the backdrop that forms my professional opinion that this is solid legislation. This bill has been notably benchmarked against international best practice, and it is progressive, innovative legislation. It is benchmarked against international practice, and it is progressive and innovative legislation. In our blueprint for change, we promise to create a sovereign wealth fund as well as a sovereign investment fund in order that we could empower Bahamians and make sure that our resources benefit the Bahamian people. We also promised to secure carbon credit payments for our natural resources. This bill facilitates all of those things. It creates a framework that will give support for the blue economy, the green economy, and the orange economy, as we promised we would do in our blueprint for change. Madam Speaker, The National Investment Funds Bill 2022 seeks to repeal and replace the Sovereign Wealth Fund Act 2016 and to provide for the establishment and management of a national investment fund regime. The bill also sets forth the principles of the management and activities of a fund and any sub-funds established for the purpose of domestic, cultural, societal advancement in the blue, green, and orange economies of the Bahamas. The bill provides a legacy for future generations of citizens of the Bahamas. It provides for the management of the natural resource wealth of the Bahamas and private investments held by the government of the Bahamas for the present and future benefit of its people in an effective and efficient manner. This bill ensures that investments in private shareholdings of the government are managed professionally for the long-term benefit of citizens of the Bahamas. It ensures that the revenues from natural resources and investments in the Bahamas contribute to the economic certainty of the country and its people. This bill provides for the fair transferring of natural resource wealth across generations to ensure that those who come after us will also benefit. It facilitates the using of natural resource wealth to finance national development priorities, including any initiative aimed at developing relatively untapped economies and infrastructure of the country. I believe this is an exciting, transformational day in this Parliament, Madam Speaker. Part 1 sets out the preliminary matters, including the short title, commencement, and interpretation provisions of the bill. You would note the name of the bill is the National Investment Funds Bill. The plural nature of the word funds is deliberate, as the bill provides for the establishment of one or more national investment funds and sub-funds. This is a sovereign wealth fund, Madam Speaker, but it is much, much more. Part 2 of the bill lays out the following reasons that a fund may be established under this law: the development of national infrastructure and public improvement projects, a public development and advancement project related to blue, green, and orange economy, to receive revenues derived from national assets and resources in public-private partnerships, to receive revenues derived from share ownerships of the government and private companies, to receive revenues derived from royalty payments, received from the exploitation of natural resources pursuant to the Biological Resources and Traditional Knowledge Act, to receive revenues derived from the trading of carbon credits, and such other sovereign assets or activities as may be specified by the minister by order, subject to the affirmative resolution of both houses of Parliament. A fund will also be in a currency determined by the Board of Governors in consultation with the Central Bank of the Bahamas, and such determination shall be published by notice in the Gazette. In essence, we have many different avenues for which to gain revenues, and this bill brings those sources under one umbrella that can manage them as they do their separate thing. So the government's ownership stake in companies like BTC, Alive, and other companies may be established in a fund, and the money derived from it can be professionally managed under the funds created in this bill for specific purposes. We'll soon be launching a blue carbon credit program, as our Prime Minister has spoken to multiple times, and therefore this bill allows a fund to be established to use the money for the benefit of Bahamians now and into the future. We can and we may set up an infrastructure fund, an education fund, utilities development fund, disaster recovery fund, etc., to drive national development, and this legislation lays the framework for us to do all of that. Part 2 of the bill also sets out the establishment and funding of such funds. It also sets out the purpose of the funds to, among other things, save and invest revenues and assets derived from activities of the fund to enhance sustainable long-term capital growth for the Bahamas, to service, repay, or refinance sovereign debt, or repay debt at a rate not exceeding 50% of the fund, in order to strengthen the credit rating of the Bahamas and to support and promote the objectives of this act and any other national development objectives of the Bahamas. Clause 7 of Part 2 notes the resources of a fund are to be derived from funds allocated by the minister or funds deposited by third-party sources with board approvals. And in this act, the minister is the Minister of Finance. Clauses 8 and 9 provide for a national investment account to be opened and maintained by a duly recognized banking institution acting as custodian, subject to provisions of a custodian agreement as between the institution and the board. Clause 10 of the bill empowers the minister to prescribe regulations to govern deposits, to as well as allocation and withdrawals of monies from the fund or a sub-fund. Part 3 of the bill provides for the overall management of a fund by an appointed board of governors that is consistent with the principles of good governance, transparency, accountability, and aligned with international best practice. Clause 12 of the bill sets out the specific appointment provisions of the board by the Governor General on the advice of the Prime Minister and establishes the constitution and procedures of the board as they are noted in the first schedule. If you look at the first schedule, you will note that the law mandates private sector participation. This is a good thing. The board will consist of 5 members to be selected from amongst persons of proven competence in matters of finance, investments, economics, business management, or law. There will be a representative from the Central Bank of the Bahamas, a counsel and attorney at law who has regulatory experience in investment funds, and 3 persons from the private sector with extensive experience in asset and fund management or fund accounting. We want this to be a true representation from the private sector. So no public officer or an officer on contract in the public service or employee of a statutory body of the government of the Bahamas or an employee of a government business enterprise or agency is permitted to sit on this board. Members of the board shall be appointed for a term of 3 years and shall not be eligible for reappointment until 3 years after the expiration of their term. Clause 13 of the bill establishes the functions of the board to determine the board's internal governance structure, investment strategy, inform and educate citizens of the Bahamas and the management activities of the board, and any other matters necessary for carrying out the purpose of the fund. Clause 14 of the bill empowers the board to monitor and seek to ensure proper governance of the Act and compliance of persons obligated under the Act, investigate complaints regarding implementation of the Act or compliance by persons under the provisions of the Act, and engage administrative support staff as necessary and appoint necessary managers and subcommittees. Part 4 provides for the investment management activities of a fund. Clause 15 sets out the investment objectives, namely to attain the highest possible return on investments at acceptable levels of risk given the investment profile of the subfund. Clause 16 and 17 sets out the investment mandate and policy mandate and empowers the minister to give directives to the board in relation to the investment mandate and policy mandates respectively. Clause 18 to 19 provides for the appointment by the board and functions of an investment committee empowered to make decisions on the acquisition and disposal of assets of a fund, to advise the board on the investment strategy, and oversee the implementation of the investment strategy. Private sector professionals with experience in this business, Madam Speaker. Clause 20 contemplates the establishment of special committees in respect of a fund or a sub-fund and prescribes the procedures of the subcommittee as noted in the second schedule. Clause 21 provides an indemnity for investment committee or special committee members against actions or proceedings commenced personally where any action performed by such members are bona fide in pursuance of the execution of the Act. Clause 22 empowers the board to engage an external asset manager duly licensed by the Securities Commission of the Bahamas to provide advisory services prescribed by the minister. External asset manager with competence and experience in this business, Madam Speaker. Part 5 sets out the miscellaneous provisions of the Act and includes clauses 23 to 33. These provisions include fund exemptions from taxation in the Bahamas, the confidentiality of the board and persons acting on behalf of the board, disclosure of pecuniary interest by a board member in relation to any matter being considered by the board, reporting to the minister, annual audit of fund and preparation and publishing of a fund statutory report. This government is about transparency and accountability, Madam Speaker. Clause 31 of the bill empowers the minister to make regulations to carry out the objectives and purposes of this act, empowers the minister to establish a code of conduct for good governance by the members. Madam Speaker, we ensure that good governance is built in. The board is independent of government. We are setting them up along the guidelines of good governance, but the board creates the sub-funds, the board appoints the investment committees. We've established even more participation with mandating private sector banks, custodians, and asset managers. We have audit and reporting controls to ensure compliance, and that deserves repeating. And we've also built in transparency. We don't just talk it, Madam Speaker. We build it in the legislation. The bill mandates the fund to establish an official website. Any matter that is required to be published in the Gazette by this act is mandated to be published on the website for a minimum period of 5 years from the date the Gazette is published. This includes any legislation relating to a fund, details and information on the fund, and any sub-fund, and any other relevant information as the board may determine. This bill has been designed with the structure of the Santiago Principles, which are 24 generally accepted principles and practices that serve as good governance guidelines for properly running sovereign wealth funds, not just in the Bahamas, but worldwide. We've benchmarked this bill and the governance practices, not just against the Santiago Principles, but we have benchmarked this fund against the best sovereign wealth funds anywhere in the world, Madam Speaker. You see, in our New Day campaign, we promised to revolutionize the way things work in this country and how business is done. And that's exactly what we're doing. This is serious business, Madam Speaker. There are those who like to talk, fluff, and blow hot air, Madam Speaker. Some believe that this is all about the political theater. But we in government, we don't have that luxury. We do real things for real people, Madam Speaker. That's what we do. We make things happen for the Bahamian people. That's what we do.
There you go.
And I touched on this the other day. Elections have consequences. They mean something. They are usually seen as a signal for renewed optimism and hope.
Take it back.
The 2021 election was a signal for renewed optimism and hope. It was a call to action. Of course, no government is perfect. No party is perfect, no person is perfect. But our success in this business of government is determined by our responses to the big problems. And this administration has the resolve to do the heavy lifting that's required. So to me, this legislation is necessary and is revolutionary. We promise to recover, rebuild, and to revolutionize. We've been recovering, we've been rebuilding, and this bill today sets us on the path to revolutionize. I love my country, Madam Speaker. like I believe we all do. I believe the Bahamas is the best place on earth, as I believe we all do. But we cannot continue to stand still and expect everything to turn out fine. We have far too many who are being left behind, and we have to innovate. We have to use global best practice to empower them. Yes. Not everyone has to be rich, but everyone should be able to live a comfortable life in their own country. And we will do this by setting a framework to continue the trajectory of growth for our country. We have at least 22 populated islands where Bahamians live. And while not all of them need the same major population centers as we have here in New Providence, they must all have equal amenities to be attractive to Bahamians. And we have committed to our family island dwellers that we will cause there to be the kind of development in their infrastructure. This legislation facilitates that through its development provisions, it will help us to build infrastructure that is desperately needed across our islands. And we're also working on making sure technology is nationwide through the Universal Service Fund. And though we have designed fiscal mechanism to bring down our deficit spending and our debt, we have a real opportunity through the carbon credit programs to shave that debt significantly. And to put this in perspective, we are spending over $500 million just to service that debt. Imagine what we can do with half of that money. Yes. Yeah. How many more schools we can build, teachers we can employ, how many more police resources we could use, how many more houses we can build for those who need our assistance in home ownership. That money has to come from somewhere. This bill has a capacity over time to ease the pressure on sovereign debt and improve our sovereign credit rating. This is a great opportunity through these funds to attract new investments in our country. A new infrastructure fund, for example, can roll in the existing bridges and leverage and attract investment for additional bridges and docks and airports and hospitals. Further, Madam Speaker, I've said several years ago in this House, whilst in opposition, that when we give up government land, we should get equity in foreign direct investment projects. I still hold that view, Madam Speaker. And I tell you that this legislation allows us to do that in a more orderly way through the Bahamas Real Estate Investment Fund. Yes. Let me be clear. This fund is not about cutting checks so that our people can quit working. It is about building a Bahamas that has less debt, a roaring economy to help people up, better and more resilient infrastructure, and hopefully over the long term, a lowered cost of living burden on all of us. Yes. So in this 5-year term, we plan on setting up a future for Bahamians that looks brighter and brighter. We want to make sure that all Bahamians can have the opportunity to succeed as I have done, and many of us here have done. I've worked in this space, as I mentioned before, for many years, and I can tell you that the opportunities for revenue generation are incredible on the global market. But we need the structure to access it. And with this, we're showing the world that we are serious about what we're doing. We're demonstrating that we're aware that nation building is serious business. We are serious about the transformation and the reforms required to continue our growth trajectory. So today, we're showing the Bahamian people that we have not forgotten our assignment. We're a small country, but we're punching way above our weight class. We have a multitude of challenges, but we also have bright minds, the political will and know-how to minimize those challenges and empower our people even further. And that's what we seek to do today. We've already been working on all cylinders to attract foreign direct investors to our country. And I continue to believe that investment is the fastest way to grow our economy. So far, we've already approved more than $5 billion of new foreign direct investments. We will continue the transformation of Bahamas Invest into 2023 to continue this level of record-setting investment attraction. We will do more, as we are doing today, to encourage even more domestic investments from institutions as well as individuals. Foreign direct investments will grow our economy quickly. Domestic investments will help us to sustain that growth, and that is what we're seeking to encourage. Madam Speaker, this bill is empowering, and these funds created will greatly enhance Bahamian empowerment. And therefore it is with enthusiasm and excitement that I move this National Investment Funds Bill 2022, and I commend it to this Honorable House. I trust that there will be no contention, and I trust we will all support this initiative as a revolutionary opportunity to enable more investments, to empower Bahamians, and to revolutionize investments in our country. May God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for South and Central Andros. No, not yet.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I'm privileged to rise in this honorable House and second this revolutionary bill on the National Investments Fund 2022, which replaces the Sovereign Wealth Fund, laid out by the Acting Prime Minister, I, Chester Cooper, the Member of Parliament for the 300-plus island and keys of Exumas and the Ragged Islands. Madam Speaker, I am happy to report that I am halfway through my Christmas tour of my 3 parts of Andros, and have one final tree lighting ceremony to commemorate in South Andros, which will take place later this week, Madam Speaker. The first 2 tree lightings went well, and I can report the Christmas spirit is alive and well in Andros. Madam Speaker, I am also proud that a son of the soil, Mr. Norwood Ramming, will be honored this week with honors from Buckingham Palace. It is surely well-deserved. In sports, 2 teams, one from Mangrove Key and one from South Andros, entered the Father Martian Peters basketball tournament. These junior boys teams played well. However, only one advanced to today's games. I plan to attend and cheer on the team from Mangrove Key, and we hope that they can make the playoff round, Madam Speaker. Both teams are to be commended as they exemplify hard work and dedication to sports. And as the young people say, Madam Speaker, I wish that no one sleeps on Andros when it comes to sports. Madam Speaker, I now turn to the National Investment Funds Bill, which seeks to provide the regulatory framework to govern activities such as public-private partnerships, private capital investments, and which will assist with the national development of our country. Previously, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which will be replaced on the passing of this bill, aimed to place revenues from petroleum resources into a fund or vehicle that allows the government to invest or reinvest in infrastructure and other projects. What this new bill, Madam Speaker, is now seeking to do is to consolidate all of our country's resources, natural and creative, into a centralized fund that will service, repay, or refinance existing national debt, strengthen the credit rating of the Bahamas, and also support and promote the national development objectives. The primary functions of a sovereign wealth fund are to stabilize the country's economy through diversification and to generate the wealth for our future generations. And while the previous bill was important in setting the stage for generating wealth for our country, this bill is more all-encompassing. The member, Madam Speaker, for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador presented the information to this honorable House a few months ago that the National Investment Fund and its various underlying sub-funds will focus on areas such as Family Island infrastructure upgrades, the blue, green, and orange economies, revenues obtained from carbon credits, the government shareholders in private companies, and the country's traditional and biological resources. With this fund, there will be a series of sub-funds aimed at promoting Family Island growth, food security, and renewable energy. We also have the opportunity, Madam Speaker, to create other sub-funds apart from those I just mentioned, to allow this New Day government to maximize value in other underutilized national assets. For example, through the Bahamas Resilient Infrastructure Fund, which is a sub-fund, we can promote partnerships for development and redevelopment of our Family Island infrastructure. As the Prime Minister said, it will be a vehicle to promote private capital mobilization to advance the country and our family of islands like never before. This fund will facilitate the government in making immediate and significant investment in Family Island infrastructure. We also propose to leverage the aviation-related revenue to create a fund for aviation infrastructure, which would be another sub-fund of the National Infrastructure Fund. This, combined with the Family Island Development Trust, will accelerate the reconstruction of Family Island airports. It will also, Madam Speaker, end the practice of Family Island infrastructure improvements being made a lesser priority than infrastructure improvements in New Providence. It is important to note, however, Madam Speaker, that this does not mean that we will be excluded from Family Island projects being included in future capital budgets of the Ministry of Works. Far from it. It just means that the Family Islands will have their own dedicated fund to ensure that they keep pace with national development. For the Renewable Energy Fund, it is the goal to receive revenues derived from royalty payments received from the exploitation of natural resources pursuant to the Biological Researches and Traditional Knowledge Act, and also to receive revenues derived from the trading of carbon credits. There is also a Food Security Fund, Madam Speaker. This will involve many public-private partnerships and other activities that will facilitate the expansion of our agriculture efforts. The time is coming Madam Speaker, when a country should be able to feed itself, especially in times of crisis. Therefore, this bill allows the government to save and invest revenues and assets and channel them into more opportunities for food security. Madam Speaker, the National Investments Bill follows the guidelines recommended within the Santiago Principles, which are a set of tenets outlined by member countries for establishment and processes involved in any sovereign wealth or government national fund. These principles and practices, as outlined by the Acting Prime Minister, I. Chester Cooper, are voluntary and allow the government to comply with regulatory and reporting requirements. The 24 principles allow for a sound legal framework, a clearly defined policy, a framework for governing bodies, guidelines for operational management, publishing for annual reports, and dealing with third parties. When we consider this bill, Madam Speaker, it encompasses much more than the previous Sovereign Wealth Bill. This bill covers more investment strategies. It addresses some underfunded areas of our country that now have the opportunity for growth and expansion. This bill shows the Davis-Cooper's administration commitment to a strategic and disciplined investment plan for our country as we look to the future for national development. Madam Speaker, it is an honor for me to stand here and represent the great people of Central, South, Andros, and Mangrove Key to second this bill as it is laid before this honorable House today. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and may all have a Merry Christmas and a prosperous, happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Sovereign Wealth Fund Act 2016 and to provide for the establishment of a national investment fund for a purpose specified in the act. As many the chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I apologize for my voice. I'm just struggling with a hoarse voice this morning, so I will do my best. Madam Speaker, it is again a privilege to speak in this honorable House on behalf of the wonderful people who inspire me every day of East Grand Bahama. Madam Speaker, this is an important bill that we debate this morning. It is again another example of the Davis administration's benefiting from the previous work of the Free National Movement.
That's what they do. That's what they do.
Madam Speaker, as I recall having a number of meetings with the IDB and the Ministry of Finance to move this project forward. The concept,
No execution.
the concept is one. Election happened. That's the reality is we started, election happened, and you took it over and you moved it forward. The concept, Madam Speaker, is one that I believe we all can agree to advance. The concept, I believe, is one that we all can agree to advance. Although, looking at the specifics of the bill, there are some fundamental differences that we have in the execution of this project. The project was presented and, as I recall, approved back in 2021 by the Free National Movement to develop a new institutional framework to mobilize additional private capital for infrastructure development. Madam Speaker, here's the problem. We are an archipelago that requires a lot of infrastructure. And this is sort of the history of how we got to this point. We are an archipelago that requires a lot of infrastructure. Harbors, schools, docks, airports, roads, ports, all must be built on all of our islands. However, we do not generate sufficient revenue to build and to maintain all of our infrastructure. And this is a real problem. It is felt across the country, and the public continues to be dissatisfied by the state of our infrastructure. Hurricane Dorian, Madam Speaker, made the problem 100 times worse by destroying infrastructure that has still not yet been repaired. And then COVID came and made it worse. It took away much of the needed revenue that we needed to rebuild the infrastructure. So that's really where the problem came in. And it is a huge problem. The IDB then looked at the PPP model of the Arawak port and said they would assist us in creating a framework to raise private sector funding to monetize a number of these projects. This was announced by myself, and it was also announced by the former Prime Minister. Madam Speaker, I said in a speech on the fiscal strategy report when we presented it to the House or to the Senate that government will move ahead, this is my words, that government will move ahead to fully establish a national infrastructure fund. These will leverage government land, government buildings, and natural resources to improve the lives and provide much needed infrastructure, especially in the family islands. The NIF will create incredible new avenues for public-private partnerships and have the ability to leverage private, domestic, and more importantly, foreign capital totaling hundreds of millions of dollars. The former Prime Minister also commented on this in his last budget communication. The IDB did a study, and they estimate that the Bahamas infrastructure investment needs to sustain a GDP growth rate equivalent to 3 to 4% is estimated today to be equivalent to 4 to 5% of GDP annually. This is equivalent to between 500 million to 600 million per year. So in other words, in order for us to achieve the type of growth that we need, you have to spend somewhere in the range of $500 to $600 million just on infrastructure development alone. And from our challenges and our fiscal challenges, we are unable to, just by government revenue alone, we are unable to spend that kind of money on our infrastructure issues. Exactly. So, Madam Speaker, that's the problem. This concept is a possible solution to that problem in creating a number of funds that you can seek private sector funding to be able to meet the development needs and to be able to also monetize some of these projects. And again, they use the example of the Arawak port, where it was a national port, but private sector funding went into the port. Persons were able to invest in it. Persons can also get a return from it. And you have the development at the same time. The Sovereign Wealth Fund also can be used to provide ownership opportunities for Bahamians. Madam Speaker, we hear people talk about this all the time, about the aragonite and all other natural resources and how we are supposed to be getting this amount of money from these natural resources. Most of it is really pie in the sky talk. But this is a real opportunity. This concept is a real opportunity that will provide everyday Bahamians an ability to invest into a fund, and a fund that is specifically dealt with to move natural resources forward and to get a return from it. The concept. There is tremendous opportunity also in government buildings that are being underutilized. We have so many government buildings that are empty, that are dilapidated. And again, the challenge is the government finding the necessary monies to renovate these buildings and put them to good use. Well, if you have a real estate fund and you can put the ownership of these buildings in the real estate fund, monetize these buildings, and then get private sector funding into the buildings, then you can then invest and ultimately get a return from it. That's really what the concept is that we are talking about. And I believe we all can agree in terms of the potential of this concept. The concept creates an opportunity for Bahamians to truly benefit from the investment in natural resources. This structure can also provide a means to invest in natural resources, and as I said, and if properly managed, it provides more than just pie in the sky talk. It is an investment fund, which means even if the government owns the assets, you have a board that must be independent and transparent and free from government political influence. And I want to talk about that just for a second. As I recall, it was designed to have an investment fund manager who is a global investment firm, who is free from political interference. This should be mainly driven, and I believe the member for Exuma said, it should be driven mainly by private sector and a private sector board. The problem, though, with this bill is, let me borrow a copy of it. Sure. The problem, though, with this bill is that it is full of potentially political influence. Let's go to the different sections in my examples. Section 5.2. Section 5.2 of the bill speaks that the minister shall by regulation prescribe the mission and the purpose of each sub-fund. Go to section 7A. Section 7A says the resources of a fund shall consist of such monies and assets as may be allocated by the minister to the fund on the commencement of this act. Look at section 10. Section 10 says the minister may make regulations to govern the deposits, to allocation of and withdrawals from a fund or any sub-fund established thereunder. Section 12.1. Section 12.1 says the governor 12.1 says that the Governor General, on the advice of the Prime Minister, shall appoint the board. So the board then is appointed by the Prime Minister. Section 13F. Section 13F says the functions of the board are to carry out the mandates of the minister pursuant to Part 4 of the Act. So the board's, one of the board's functions
What was the main objective?
is to carry out the mandates of the minister.
Board of Governors.
That's section 13F. Section 16(1). The minister may give directives in writing regarding the investment mandate on the management of a fund. Section 16(3). In prescribing the investment mandate, the minister shall give considerations to these things. It is again,
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exumas in Ragged Island.
Member raises an interesting point. He's allowed me, Madam Speaker. We're being cordial today, Senance. The member outlines a good observation, but it's important to note that these are public funds, and it is the government that sets the policy. If the minister looks at the member from East Grand Bahama, if he looks at I believe, Schedule 1, and also he looks at the mandate of the investment committee and the board, he would see the level of authority and autonomy that they have. So yes, somebody has to appoint the board. Yes, somebody has to develop the overarching policy, and that has to be the minister. But when it comes to the strategy and the management and the independence of this fund, there is a board comprised of independent persons. There's an investment committee comprised of independent persons. So as a whole, I believe that the appropriate balance is struck.
Madam
Thank you,
Speaker,
honorable member. You may proceed.
I appreciate the comments made by Exuma. But in my view, there's a difference between the board being independent and the board having the decision-making ability, and a board that is subject to the minister and taking directives from the minister. You know, I recall, I believe it was Hubert Ingram who said that we should make laws when we are in government that we are prepared to live with when we are in opposition. And to have, and again, we agree with this concept. It is needed to have a private sector and the ability to be able to invest private sector funds. And this isn't for every project. So my envisioning this, or how I would envision this to work, is only particular projects would be placed in each of these funds. So the government doesn't place all of its assets in these funds, but the government looks at what could be monetized and places particular projects in these funds, and in essence gives the autonomy to that private sector board who knows what they are doing when it comes to raising investments. And we do not want a situation where there is a minister who gives the directives to that board. So, Madam Speaker, let me just go further. Also, the first schedule, 1 sub 2, where it says the minister, why do we need the minister to appoint the chairman of the board? Why couldn't the board? If we believe this board is, if we believe that this board is so has such expertise, then why couldn't the board appoint its own chairman? Why would the minister have to appoint the board, appoint the chairman? The board should appoint the chairman. The board can decide amongst themselves who would be chairman. And again, that's the challenge. That's the challenge, Madam Speaker, in terms of the balance of power and whether or not we are prepared to give up the balance of power to this board to really make this work. The idea really is for this to be a private sector driven board. Madam Speaker, the member quite rightly referred to the Santiago Principles. So I took a look at the Santiago Principles. I took the time to review them, print them out, table them if necessary. And they are a group of principles that were decided amongst countries as to how sovereign wealth funds should work. And by and large, the research that I did says one of the reasons why they came up with the Santiago Principles was because there was too much political influence on sovereign wealth funds. So they wanted a mechanism upon which there can be set rules as to how you manage sovereign wealth funds. Madam Speaker, on page 12 of the Santiago Principles, and I quote, here's what they say about political influence. A clearly defined policy purpose will also ensure that the operational management of the sovereign wealth fund will conduct itself professionally and ensure that the sovereign wealth fund undertakes investments without any intention or obligation to fulfill a directly or indirectly any geopolitical agenda of the government. They have said in the Santiago Principles itself that the sovereign wealth fund should not, by whether we intend to or whether we don't, or whether it's unintentional, whether it's direct or whether it is indirect, that we should not use the sovereign wealth fund to address or to pursue the geopolitical agenda of the government. This is what it says in the Santiago Principles. I didn't make this up. This is what was quoted from the Santiago Principles. So, Madam Speaker, the challenge, that's one challenge that I believe we on this side have, is that there is too much political influence embedded in this bill. This also has significant implications. In fact, the very purpose of the Santiago Principles was to address the political interference. This has implications. Investment is not only for Bahamians, and this is key. We are not only seeking Bahamian dollar investments. We are going to a global market. It is to attract the big international dollars that we need. It provides an opportunity for national development, maintaining national ownership, but using international investors to be able to accomplish this. But international investors want the highest standards. They do not want to be subject to the political directorate. They want confidence that their investment dollars are being used and held at the highest standards, and that it is not subject to a political directorate. Madam Speaker, it is all connected. At present, we are still not doing enough to defend ourselves internationally and in the international community from the fall of FTX. It is all connected. We are being called all manner of things from all manner of people. One speech from the Attorney General is not enough. Truth be told, it seems that there's even more negative reviews.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Exumas and Ragged Island.
Greatest respect, Madam Speaker. I believe you ruled on this matter a few sittings ago. And the member is aware, and I'm sure he recalls that ruling. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member.
Madam Speaker, I have not breached that ruling whatsoever. What I am speaking about, I'm not talking about the individual issue with FTX. I'm speaking about protecting our reputation internationally. That is what I'm talking about, Madam Speaker. Yeah, but anybody could mention FTX.
Members.
I am not precluded from mentioning the name of FTX. I'm not speaking about any details about FTX. I am saying that as a result of what has taken place, our reputation is being damaged internationally, and we are not doing enough to protect our international reputation. Has the government yet met with industry in terms of dealing with our reputational damage? Has the government consulted with industry on how we manage our international message? Has the government met with the opposition? I can tell you no, they have not, in terms of joining together to have a one message when it comes to combating this international reputational damage. Also, Madam Speaker, why have we not yet been provided with additional information on the status of the investigation? The public, the international public,
Which investigation?
also requires additional information as to what is taking place to protect our
The chair recognizes the
reputation.
honorable member for Exumas and Ragged Island.
Madam Speaker, you ruled on this matter.
Yeah.
And we determined from that ruling that this was not a matter that this House would litigate.
Yes.
And therefore, Madam Speaker, I believe he is in full defiance of your ruling, Madam Speaker. And I ask that he desist or he be stopped, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker,
Honorable member, I'll ask you to deviate.
I am very respectful, Madam Speaker, of your ruling. And I ask, Madam Speaker, that you take note of the difference in the specifics of FTX, which I am not speaking about, and what has resulted what has happened as a result of the FTX. Now, what has happened as a result of FTX is our international reputation is being damaged. And unfortunately, when we go to the public, and we go to the public with this investments fund, it is again the same principles that we're going to the same international market. In other words, the same international market that we are going to ask for monies for this fund is the same international market that is also criticizing us on a daily basis. And my issue is one of defending the Bahamas' good name. Madam Speaker,
Yes. I understand, honorable member, but we have a decision has been made that we would deviate from FTX until.
Madam Speaker, it is all connected. The BPL hedging was an investment opportunity. There is also a question as to what role will the sovereign wealth fund play? What role will the sovereign wealth fund play with state-owned enterprises like BPL? One of the projects that the initial thinking was behind the infrastructure fund was a renewable energy project with BPL. So, we still don't know yet, Madam Speaker, who made the decision for the BPL hedging issue. We still don't know who is going to take responsibility for that decision. Why did the political directorate not take the advice of the technical persons who are paid to give good advice? And again, it is connected because the reason why we raised the concern in this investment bill about taking directives from politicians is the very same point with the BPL hedging. Because if those people who know what they're doing, who are paid to know what they're doing, and they give you advice, and the political directorate does not take that advice, we do not want to end up in the same kind of situation with this investment bill. We want a situation where we give the autonomy to those people who know best, those investors who know, those investment fund managers who know what they're doing. They know how to manage a fund, and they know how to invest, and where to invest, and what to invest. And if we leave it where you have, they are subject to the political directorate, we're going to end up in the same situation that we ended up in with the BPL hedging problem. Madam Speaker, the Davis administration is also extremely late with the fiscal strategy report of 2022. This was due to be tabled in November of this year. And again, we are speaking about transparency with this investment fund bill, and we are speaking to the obligations of this investment fund bill. Well, they cannot even present to Parliament in
Stay focused, buddy. Stay focused. Doing good. You're doing good. Stay focused. Stay focused. Stay focused.
47 seconds. 47 seconds.
Mr. Deputy, could I get an assessment? I believe I may have about 8 minutes left.
10 minutes. 10. I think 10. How many
No, no,
timekeepers
no,
we have with him?
no.
There's one timekeeper. He said
How much time do we have, Mr. Paul?
we have one timekeeper.
4 minutes and 47 seconds.
4 minutes and 47?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll be able to complete in time. Mr. Deputy, the Davis administration is again extremely late with the fiscal strategy report of this year. This is due to be tabled, or was due to be tabled in November. And here's the thing, Mr. Deputy, nobody has said a word about it. Nobody has even given the public the courtesy of telling us, or the courtesy to Parliament to say, this is why it's late, and this is when it's going to come. They've completely ignored it, as if there's no obligation whatsoever to report on to give a fiscal strategy report. Just blatantly ignoring the law, and it is in Parliament, and it is the same force. It is of the same force as the budget communication. And we take the budget communication absolutely seriously because it is the same force of law. It is unbelievable, Mr. Deputy. Here's another challenge that we have passed, and I asked the member for Exuma to look at this question. Member for Exuma, to look at this question. The act, we are talking about investment funds. We passed an Investment Funds Act 2019 that governs how the Bahamas deals with investment funds. If private investment funds have a high standard under the Act, how does this align with the 2019 Act? In other words, is every fund that is included in the National Investment Fund Act subject to the rules of the Investment Funds Act that governs how all investment funds deal with? And if it is not, should it be? Because if investors, private investors, have to be governed by and subject to those rules, then why should the private investment fund be subject to those rules and the government funds or the government investment funds not be subject to those rules? Yeah, because if it is not, then if I'm an investor, I'm looking for the opportunity that is going to be subject to the highest standard of rules. And one of those legal principles is that, in essence, if it is not specifically included, in other words, if it's not stated in the bill, that it is subject to the Investment Funds Act, then automatically it is not. And that, we believe, is a problem. Also, what are the government's plans? This is just a framework. This is just a framework as to what's going on. What are the government's plans? What are the potential projects that are going to be included in this? I'm sure, we've spoken about these carbon credits and, all the connections with FTX and the carbon credits and all that stuff. Fine. But what about the port in Abaco? Is that going to be included in this? What about the port in Abaco? What about Cooperstown? What about a partnership
You can do it now.
with our Grand Bahama port?
You can do it now.
What about which airports are going to be included?
You ain't lose the money.
Tourism-related projects are of great benefit. So what are those things that are going to be benefited? What are those projects? Again, this is only just a framework without telling us specifics as to what is happening. So in terms of the way forward, Mr. Deputy,
Relevant questions.
have you put together a project execution unit? Who is in that project execution unit? What will the process be? What will the process be to contract the advisory financial firm? We believe and we demand that this be done by public tender. This cannot be where you choose your friend to be the financial advisor. But this should go publicly out and internationally out. And part of the connection should be that we have a global firm that must be connected to a Bahamian firm. And Mr. Speaker, if I could just end with this. Public consultation. This is important. It is an important issue. It is one that the public would like to have their say in. And so before we move forward on any specific project, we should have public consultation. And a last point, Madam Speaker, that I raise with respect to the Ministry of Finance, if I can. Last point that I wish to ask the member for Exuma, acting Prime Minister.
Are you wrapping up, honorable member?
Yes, I'm wrapping up. The customs brokers in the Providence, no, I'm asking a question, please. The customs brokers in Nassau and in Grand Bahama are being asked to fund a computer program to the tune of some $3,000 and a monthly fee. I asked the Deputy Prime Minister to ask and look into this matter, because if the customs brokers are pushed to expend this additional monies, it will then go and be translated to be paid for by the public, which is going to be an additional cost for bringing goods in. So I ask the government to please speak with the Ministry of Finance and look at this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
This is a point of order, Mr. Deputy. I didn't want to interrupt because I just wanted him to finish, Mr. Deputy. But he seemed to suggest there could be the possibility of the government selecting advisors without going through the process. The member is well aware that there is the Procurement Act. He is well aware of the conventions as it relates to selecting advisors, Mr. Deputy. And therefore, the pontification might suggest to the public that something untoward may be afoot, when simply we are putting in place the framework that governs these funds. And that is all this legislation seeks to do. Further, Madam Speaker, sorry, Mr. Deputy, on the issue of independence, I would invite the member for East Grand Bahama to look at Schedules 1 and to acquaint himself with Schedule 2, which will demonstrate that Bahamian professionals who comply with code of ethics of their profession, Mr. Deputy, are appointed to be the directors of the board as well as the investment committee. And of course, he referenced the Santiago principle itself. And therefore, we are satisfied, Mr. Deputy, of the framework for accountability, independence, and transparency.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Nassau Village.
Good morning, Mr. Deputy. Good morning, colleagues. Before I begin, I would just like to extend the sincerest condolences to the Morse family, the Corley family, the Morris family, and all of the families that are in bereavement in the constituency at this particular point in time. I have the honor and privilege of standing before you on behalf of the great constituents of Nassau Village once again. Mr. Deputy, we had an amazing culture in the park, and I would just like to extend gratitude to the member for Garden Hills and also Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, Mr. Mario Boleg, Honorable Mario Boleg. It was definitely a time, John Canoe, vendors, and I would just say an overall depiction of what true Bahamian culture is. Mr. Deputy, humility and strength emerge when one learns from the past and garners feedback to guide the future. Now, we've been speaking into debate, and I would not have us neglect or forget the reputational damages that would have been incurred under the last administration, namely the Oban deal, and also having our Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, go aboard. Not for discussion, just referencing it, right? And also having our former Prime Minister go abroad and call the nation corrupt. And these are the things that seem to slip from memory once you become the side opposite. Mr. Deputy, as public servants, our job is to help build the Bahamas that will prosper for generations. Each day, our administration takes precise steps toward achieving this reality, aware that we must reevaluate measures, policies in the interest of all Bahamians, considering that the advancement needs and progress of our diversifying economy is still moving forward. Mr. Deputy, the National Investment Funds Act repeals the Sovereign Wealth Fund Act. Considering the Bahamas' lack of investment in critical infrastructural projects and burgeoning industries, the Investment Funds Act maximizes the value of public assets for Bahamians, better targets and directs monies and funds to key economic development priorities. It mobilizes private capital toward critical projects and better manages the country's natural resources. This act is all-encompassing, aiming to address the investment deficiencies in numerous industries and sectors of society at all levels, and at all levels of engagement and governance. Sound investment is crucial to building a prosperous Bahamas and obtaining a greater return on investment for public funds. Mr. Deputy, these benefits are meritorious. However, we will move forward by asking, how will this act materialize policy into tangible economic benefits for Bahamians? As I canvass my neighborhood and my constituents always ask for me to break down the policies being put forward, because they will hold me accountable in the years to come and say, well, how did you contribute to the development and the progress of our dear nation? To understand the forthcoming answers to this question, we must unearth the origins of the act. It comes from the concept of a sovereign wealth fund, a way for nations to invest surplus capital into other markets or investment. Many nations use sovereign wealth funds to amass profit to benefit their economy and citizens. In 2016, the Bahamas passed our Sovereign Wealth Act. Yet it does not adequately consider the nation's modern, multi-layered economy and the full breadth of our investment needs. Therefore, the current National Investment Funds Act replaces the 2016 Act and aims to create generational wealth for future Bahamians. This wealth will be achieved in various forms. The Investment Funds Act enables the establishment of a national investment fund and sub-funds, collecting government revenue streams that will be used to pay back public debt and finance future initiatives. Having a central repository to perform these actions observes international best practices. You see, Mr. Deputy, at the cornerstone of this particular act is accountability and transparency.
Yes.
The world's second largest national investment fund is Norway's Norge Bank Investment Management, which manages assets totaling $1.13 trillion. As the member from Exuma and Ragged Islands and the Deputy Prime Minister stated, this act is benchmarked against best practices internationally. The Bahamas' National Investment Fund will contain resources earmarked for diversifying and strengthening our economy, meaning more jobs, Mr. Deputy, meaning better opportunities, Mr. Deputy, and a robust industry for Bahamians. Furthermore, a centralized entity, the board will manage the fund and its detailed activities. Mr. Deputy, the Act provides revenue for managing the Bahamas' extensive natural resources and private investments held by the government. These resources total billions of dollars of arable land, aragonite, forestry, oil resources, limestone, salt, and sand. Mr. Deputy, shrewd management is key. Shrewd management involves consultation with environmentalists and other experts aimed at sustainably farming and utilizing these resources, while select sales will help bolster our economy by generating millions. Mr. Deputy, foreign investment is a vital potential tenet of national development funds. By internationally investing monies, the Bahamas will diversify its portfolio of assets further, while obtaining foreign reserves. Mr. Deputy, the Act also crucially encourages fund financing to advance the Bahamas' blue, green, and orange economies, domestically, culturally, and societally. Developing these sectors of our economy is fundamental to the Bahamas' remaining competitive globally and creating a legacy for future Bahamians. Mr. Deputy, some people might see this act as a viable one. The viability of this act would question, how does the National Investment Fund Act differ from the Sovereign Wealth Fund? The National Investment Funds Act empowers the creation of an investment fund, and that fund aims to attain the highest achievable returns on investment for public funds by addressing the deficiencies of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Foremost, the Act includes vital language for the blue, green, and orange economies, emphasizing the government's forethought surrounding each sector's contemporary growth, fiscal optimism, and outlook for the Bahamas. Steady investment in each sector will increase their market share, create careers, help build much-needed infrastructure, strengthen their presence throughout the country, and spawn more opportunities, whereby continuing to diversify the Bahamian economy. Mr. Deputy, there's been much debate and much talk around these colored economies, blue, green, orange, etc. The blue economy encompasses all economic activities that generate wealth from the world's coast and oceans, spanning various industries, institutions, and activities. The term means sustainably using ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods, and jobs, while preserving health of ocean ecosystems. As a small island developing state, the Bahamas is aquatic. Water broadly covers our nation, and financing is needed to unlock the capacity of our oceans, while guaranteeing sustainability. Managing the blue economy is a complex one, Mr. Deputy, because one sector's activity can possibly negatively impact many ecosystems and communities. Our nation must work cohesively at domestic, regional, and international levels to share data, resources, and innovations. According to the International Development Bank, 21.5% of the Bahamas' gross domestic product rises to 50%, which include indirect impacts, along with a staggering 54.5% of wages earned from the ocean economy, from the blue economy. I'll reiterate that. 54.5% of our wages emerge from the ocean and blue economies by which tourism thrives. And a 73% of employment are attributed to the blue economy as well. With proper management, marine resources can become a significant source of economic production for our nation. The National Investment Fund prioritizes the blue economy by realizing its untapped potential for the Bahamas. Mr. Deputy, similarly, the green economy of the Bahamas suffers from low funding, rising interest, and fledgling regulations. As defined by the United Nations, the green economy is a low-carbon resource, efficient and socially inclusive. It focuses on reducing carbon emissions and pollution, preventing the loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services, and enhancing energy and resources efficiently. Green economy areas are pervasive throughout our nation, including renewable energy, land management, sustainable transport, and water management. Mr. Deputy, we are a Sunbelt nation, which means that we are graced by the majority of our years being in sunshine. All right? Which also means that if we, by some means, and we will, take full advantage of solar power, we'll be able to enhance the green economy and possibly move towards export. Mr. Deputy, by encouraging the national development of this particular sector, the National Investment Funds Act supports the incorporation of green principles when building infrastructure and economic investments and activities, aiming to ensure the Bahamas achieves true sustainability. Mr. Deputy, the orange economy. This act intends to finance the orange economy, which needs greater investment to develop its sector's full potential, representing Bahamians. From our beloved Jonkanu to theater at the Dundas Center for the Performing Arts, to straw work, to the orange economy encompassing differing sectors that oversee these activities, with their own investment needs, regulation, infrastructure, and challenges for advancement. Mr. Deputy, the National Investment Fund Act removes language stopping the government from investing directly in Bahamians and their businesses, plus the government's restrictions not to use funds on capital expenditure. Investment begins at home, Mr. Deputy, and I repeat, investment begins at home. To create generational wealth, Bahamians must be engaged from its inception. By investing in Bahamian businesses, the government emphasizes their resolve to support its people and building capital, infrastructure in significant ways to foster sectoral confidence and improve each sector by creating physical spaces. These spaces can be multifaceted, such as a new sustainable port providing benefits for the green and blue economy, or a national Jonkanu museum aiding the orange economy. Mr. Deputy, the National Investment Funds Act also proposes more oversight and regulations, helping dispel ambiguity and ensuring that transparency remains the cornerstone. The Act stipulates the powers of the Minister, the Board of Investment Committee, and special committees for sub-funds. The Act's intent is expressed and potential sources of revenue are detailed for greater clarity. Sources include revenue from trading carbon credits and royalty payments to full utilization of natural resources. All of these elements indicate an investment regime that intends to work astutely for Bahamians, observing checks and balances to enhance the sustainable long-term capital growth of the Bahamas. With the government engaging in public-private partnership, PPPs, achieving this growth becomes more feasible. The National Investment Funds Act facilitates the government's use of PPPs to partner with private investors and use their capital to fund government projects. This enables the government to vastly increase its projects and its project scope by funding more projects simultaneously. Mr. Deputy, this simply means major investments, a new airport in Kidd Island, major investments, a new port in Exuma, major investments, a new multi-purpose community center in the constituency of Nassau Village. Both the government and the private investor both benefit from PPPs. Because these durations are long-term and sometimes span over decades, allowing for comfortable repayment. Mr. Deputy, in conclusion, I would like to remind this honorable and august body that the constituency of Nassau Village remains on the vanguard of advancement. Weeks ago, we began refurbishment of our new multi-purpose center. Bringing this center to fruition involves extensive public and private partnerships throughout the community. Nassau Village constituents were hired to oversee its refurbishment, while the government continues to live by and ensure that all Bahamians see that it's a new day by delivering to all Bahamians throughout the length and breadth of the country. Although the National Investment Funds Act is currently being tabled, its tenets are ever present throughout the Nassau Village constituency and the Greater Bahamas. Akin to the act, we will create generational wealth and build a legacy for future Nassau villagers and Bahamians at large. The National Investment Funds Act lays the foundational investment framework for us to build a more diverse economy, a more prosperous economy, and a more robust economy for the Bahamas. So it brings me great joy to support this bill on behalf of the constituency of Nassau Village. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. I'd like to once again thank Almighty God for this opportunity to once again be in our parliament to speak on behalf of the wonderful people of Marco City, to whom I'm eternally grateful, and on behalf of Bahamians who expect all of us to consistently act in their best interests. And all of our members have made that commitment that we will consistently act in the best interests of the Bahamian people. I wish to commend my colleagues for the significant amount of work that has been done in the past that contributes to the piece of legislation that we are now looking at. And the member for East Grand Bahama, in advance of my arrival, addressed this matter comprehensively. So a number of items, Mr. Deputy, I need not speak to, except to say in general, so that it is absolutely clear that we support any effort being made to ensure that the various natural resources of the Bahamas are deposited into a sovereign wealth fund for the benefit of Bahamian people today and those unborn. Secondly, we also support creating a framework that would enable us to appropriately utilize the natural resources in a manner that it does not compromise sustainability in the future. So one, we support all of our assets being put in a sovereign wealth fund, and two, creating various frameworks that would allow us and those designated to properly utilize the natural resources, to protect them, to trade on them, so that we can generate the required revenue in order to benefit the Bahamian people. Note that I did not say to create a framework to generate revenue to benefit the government of the day. And the point has been made loud and clear that government ought to be careful the extent to which we seek to inject ourselves into micromanaging directly or by proxy the use or the utilization of our natural resources. And so we will support this bill simply because, again, it addresses our patrimony. It addresses us taking the wide range of natural resources, depositing it in a sovereign wealth fund, and now beginning to take steps on how we ought to create the framework for proper utilization. Having said that, let me be quick to make the point that this administration has, with very few exceptions, set a horrible pattern of introducing extremely important legislation to the Bahamian people. To the credit of the member of West End and Bimini, workshops was held inviting various stakeholders to come and have a discussion about the government's consideration of addressing the issue of violence against women in the context of marriage. Has the government arrived at a position on this matter? No, it hasn't. Clearly, its caucus is divided. But at a minimum, there was a public discussion and explanation of terms involved, the old legislation, and the proposed adjustment to that legislation. Something as critical as this warrants widespread public discussion, with various stakeholders being able to engage in a clear, dispassionate discussion about how we are going to address the issue of our patrimony, how we're going to address the issue of our natural resources. The truth is, if you were to take every member of the governing side and put them in separate rooms, in fact, let's go further. If you were to take every member of cabinet and put them in separate rooms and ask them what are their views on this particular bill before us, you are likely to get at least 10 different variations, 10 variations on what the view is on this particular
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Because there hasn't been.
Ma'am, this is complete conjecture, Mr. Deputy.
What's the point of order?
And it's
Honorable members, yeah, St. Anne's, let him finish, and he'll get to the point of order, I hope, if you let him finish. Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma.
and it is misleading, Mr. Deputy. When the government presented a piece of legislation, the mover, which was me in this particular case, outlines the position of the government and the position of the cabinet. This cabinet operates in decency and in order, Mr. Deputy. We have one position on this matter, and the mover of this debate today presented the cabinet's position. The member who has been a cabinet member of a former administration completely understands collective responsibility, and therefore this whole idea of, polling and this and that and the rest really is just rhetoric, Mr. Deputy. Let's be clear that the position of the government has been put, and that is the position of the cabinet. We needn't conduct a poll, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, honorable member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. As I mentioned before, if you were to take individual cabinet ministers and put them in a separate room and ask their interpretation of this bill, at a minimum, you are likely to get 10 different variations on the import and impact of this piece of legislation. Here's why I'm making that case. There are many matters in this proposed legislation that have not yet been sorted out. And I don't wish to be disrespectful to members on the governing side by using hyperbole as the member for Exoma did when we introduced any number of financial pieces of legislation, because we can assert that this piece of legislation is fairly close to count salad in some respects, in that what it does in some respect is it diminishes the impact of earlier pieces of legislation that are tied to the Sovereign Wealth Fund. We would recall in 2016, while I was in the Senate, we dealt with the matter of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and we tied it in large measure to the issue related to oil drilling and the potential benefit to the country in the event that oil was found. When we dealt with the access benefit sharing piece of legislation, and we looked at the potential benefit that the Bahamian people could get, looking at the DNA of whether it was animals or looking at the benefits we could have derived from plants, again, we sought to make sure that we no longer had the problem that has been created in the past, where researchers came to the Bahamas, studied our flora and fauna, and then, unbeknownst to us, they entered into relationships with universities and with private companies, created lines of products that resulted in tens and hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue generated and no benefit accrued to us. The Sovereign Wealth Fund is the correct place for our flora, our fauna, whether you're talking about the pine barrens, whether you're talking about the coppice vegetation, whether you're talking about what is on land, terrestrial, or those that are waterways, whether by salt water or fresh water. There are a multiplicity of opportunities. The way this bill is structured, it did not benefit from any number of stakeholders who would have assisted the government in streamlining how this was introduced. Somehow, this New Day government, with bad old ways, does not believe that the Bahamian people are smart enough for them to consult and benefit from the expertise that exists in our community, so that we are in a position to make the best possible decision as
The
a
chair
country.
recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
The member references the Biological Resources Bill, I think it was called, the one that his administration led. It's actually covered. That's the first point. And second point is, Mr. Deputy, there was consultation on the bill. And the third point is, I would just invite the honorable member not to insult the intelligence of the Bahamian people.
Thank you, honorable member.
It's interesting that the member for Exuma, Mr. Deputy, mentioned consultation without itemizing the different agencies that they have consulted with. But the public is certainly aware. The public is certainly aware that when it came to any number of important consultations over the course of the last year, they have refused to engage in consultation. They certainly haven't consulted with the opposition. A number of us had the courtesy of consulting with them while we were in government. In fact, there were a number of pieces of legislation that you were invited to view, to hear from the technical team prior to proceeding. But the arrogance of this administration, they do not believe it is important to consult with the Bahamian people. That's why the pharmacists stopped them in their track. That's why they're having all kinds of problems with the grocers now. That's why they're having problems with North and South Abaco, because again, when they were demolishing the domes, they didn't consult with their own colleagues. It is incredible when they were dealing with the issue of illegal immigrants and unregulated development, they didn't pay the courtesy to their own colleagues to have an open, transparent discussion, consultation, and plan of action. So this is not an administration. It's not built into, since we're talking about biological resources, it's not built into their DNA to consult or conduct the requisite studies so that they are able to make informed, evidence-based decisions. And so
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakura.
Pictures, say cheese.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the member has submitted in his speech a few times that this administration has no intention or otherwise of consulting on matters when it comes to the Bahamian people. He is absolutely incorrect, absolutely. And this is coming from a former cabinet member who was just sitting in cabinet a few months ago, who surprised even his own members on the same side with a VAT increase of 60% that caused the resignation of some that didn't support. The point of order is,
Honorable members, order.
the point of order is that unless the member is accurate in his statements, he should withdraw or refrain from going down the road. His statements are inaccurate, it's misleading, and it is untrue. And that's why he stands up. That's why he stands up every time there's a member that brings a point of order.
Honorable members.
Every time.
Order. 1 minute. Please.
Mr. Deputy.
Okay.
Every time the member brings a point of order, which in this House are very, very few, if any, he is allowed to pontificate, he is allowed to grandstand. And he allowed to grandstand. But the moment we use the rules to bring a point of order, he jumps up in the middle of a point of order to interrupt the speech. This is unacceptable, Mr. Deputy. And we do not come here to this House to waste the people's time.
Honorable members, Yamakura.
In the same, I'm still on my feet. Yeah. I'm still on my feet.
Members, order.
There's a speaker. There's a speaker.
Order. Yeah.
You're standing.
Listen. Okay, Marco City, honorable member, let him finish. You wrapping up, Mr. Yamakura, honorable member?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. And it's become a trend that just a sentence, that getting a sentence out on a point, that the member springs up from his seat. This is his speech. He don't have to spring up. He can speak to it after I sit down. But the point of order is he is misleading and he is untrue in his statements about consultation. Grossly untrue, especially when they have done the exact opposite just recently.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Obviously, the member is applying for the job that will soon be vacated by the member for Fort Charlotte. And so clearly, you are applying for that soon-to-be vacant job of being the guardian of the rules of the House. And I do believe a junior member should have that rule. I do believe a junior member should have that job in any event. So no problem. So you should have said be respectful to your colleagues who issued press releases in order to help you all get rid of Fort Charlotte. That's what it is. We see the facts.
Honorable members. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Speaker, I would only ask the honorable member for Marco City not to refer to his colleagues as junior members. We are all elected by the people of our constituency, and that respect should be accorded. This is an honorable place.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Mr. Deputy, we have tremendous fatigue with the member for Exuma talking about respect. This is the same member This is the same member in the last sitting, Madam Speaker, who, while outside talking to the union told him that they felt he was union busting, and then he comes in the house
Yes, sir.
and attempt to say that we were making the story up.
That's right.
When multiple union leaders said he and they were engaged.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for
Talking about
Exuma.
respect, you have to earn it. You have to earn it.
Mr. Deputy, we know that the member is an actor in his former life. But this is the House of Assembly. This is not the Regency Theater, Mr. Deputy. And we asked the member to not relitigate,
Honorable members.
to not relitigate, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy,
Order.
he is relitigating. Mr. Deputy,
Members.
the member is relitigating.
Honorable members. Honorable members. Yeah.
Sit down, man.
Marco City.
down.
Marco City.
down.
Let the honorable member for
The
Exuma
speaker
finish.
recognize me. Take your seat.
Yeah.
Sit down, man. Sit.
Honorable members.
I have the floor. The speaker
Okay.
recognize me. The speaker, sit down.
Honorable members. Members. Marco
Speaker.
City. Exuma has the floor. Can he
Thank you.
let him wrap up?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. The member is attempting to run the same old stories that he was trying to run last week. The issue was litigated, and Mr. Deputy, there's now a question of relevance. We're talking about unions, Mr. This issue was addressed last week, and we asked the member not to relitigate the same old tired subjects. Because each time he does that, he will use the time of this honorable House on what is an important revolutionary bill, Mr. Deputy.
Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, honorable member.
Mr. Deputy, I want to remind the country, when I raised the issue of union busting as presented to my colleagues and I last week, the member for Exuma and Ragged Island was most aggressive in denying. What we did not know at the time is the nature of his conversation with the very union leaders who accused his team of union busting. But he wants to come in the House and give the public the impression, Mr. Deputy, I am not yielding until I finish the point I'm making. And I'm entitled to finish the point. Mr. Deputy, I am entitled to
let him
finish
finish.
the point.
Finish your point and then.
Mr. Deputy, the member for Exuma and his team was accused of union busting. We shared articles in the Parliament in our last sitting using the words of union leaders. This member then sought to convince the House that we invoked a word not previously used by union leaders, but that somehow we invented it to lay an accusation against the government. What I am saying is this member cannot talk about withdrawing a statement which the union leaders themselves are on the record of accusing them of. That is the point that I'm making. And I'd like to proceed with the rest of my presentation,
Now,
Mr.
Hold on. Yeah, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Mr. Speaker, at our last sitting, the member was taken to task by the member for West Grand Bahama.
Who failed?
And me, Mr.
Who
Deputy.
failed? Who failed?
Who cautioned the member not to speak loosely on these matters, and claiming in this honorable House that this government was union busting. Nothing could be further from the truth.
That's what they
Mr.
said about
Deputy.
you.
Nothing could be further from the truth. What can be said on the street cannot be said in this honorable chamber, Mr. Deputy. This is an honorable place. There's a record that's developed by the Hansard when words are spoken here, and for this member to accuse this government of union busting. This government has signed more union agreements in the last year, Mr. that perhaps they've signed in their entire term. We are friends of the union, Mr. Deputy. He is a stranger to the truth.
Thank you, honorable member.
You are friends of the union as you run out of the House of Assembly. You are friends of the union, which is why you call SWAT teams with machine guns outside to guard the Parliament when the workers of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas came to talk to you. You ran then as you're running now.
Yes, sir.
Friends of the union, yet SWAT team is all on the outside.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
I think the member for Marco, the member of Marco City, might wish to refrain what he says, simply because you're suggesting in your verbiage that the deputy or members on this side called that was instructed by. I don't think you want to say that.
Thank you, honorable member.
Let me restate it for you, member for West End and Bimini. The member asserts that this administration are friends of the union. You had ample notice that the union was coming. When I arrived, there were heavily armed officers present in the front of the Parliament. Is that how you greet your friends? Is that how you greet your friends? So let me say this. I implore this administration, let us have a public discussion with respect to this important investment bill, the new sovereign wealth bill. Let's identify what are the various natural resources. You may wish to take the time to have that discussion, to talk about the tangible as well as intangible natural resources, those that you are aware of today and those that we do not yet know about. It is that kind of robust discussion that is going to assist us and guide us in terms of wealth creation for Bahamians as well as opportunities that can be created for those who are employed by others. You know, I heard on my way here from the airport another whale attempt to silence the opposition when the member for East Grand Bahama talked about FTX, as if, I mean, it is the most infantile approach to public discourse that I've seen in a very long time. In the case of FTX and the nexus between that and this, we would recall that this administration, the Cooper-Davis administration, made a determination that it was going to trade the carbon credits on the FTX platform. Now, the question was, what motivated this administration to want to trade on that particular platform, given the newness of cryptocurrency itself versus other exchanges? And what we do not know today, as while we're in here, were there any agreements signed that parked that $300 million amount of assets with FTX at this point? We wish for clarification. So the Prime Minister, if the member for Yamakwa just listen and learn for a moment, it may be beneficial. So here's what, Mr. Deputy, by December of this year, the Prime Minister forecasted.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakwa.
Deputy, as I recall, the House, the Speaker made a ruling on this particular matter, which is still before the courts. There's a lot of speculations. There's a lot of speculation from the other side. The good member is again grandstanding, stretching the truth, and misleading. And therefore, he should refrain from going down that road and continue with the debate at hand. At least once, can we come into the people's house? Can we come and calling the decision of the Speaker infantile is something that is grossly disrespectful. And it should not continue to happen, Mr. Deputy. And I would ask that the member be made to refrain from going down this road because he has already crossed the line a number of times.
Let me explain to a couple of members on the government side what is disrespectful. What is disrespectful is sending police to people's houses, inviting them to the police station to go on a fishing expedition because they are associated with one or the other ministry. That widespread fishing expedition that your administration is engaged in, intimidating Bahamians, that is disrespectful. What is disrespectful? What is disrespectful is picking folks up and not advising them of their rights so that you're able to put undue pressure on them, hoping that they are going to damage somebody else. What is disrespectful? What is disrespectful? What is disrespectful is looking for people to levy new charges on when you have colleagues who already have charges, but you can't bring the case forward. What is disrespectful? Y'all don't want to go down that road of what is disrespectful.
Honorable members.
What is disrespectful?
Order.
Mr. What is disrespectful? Mr. What is disrespectful? What is disrespectful is for a member in this house more than 8 times to claim not to know about a hedging program, and you all beat on the desk only to find out that it was untruthful. Wow. And even when a press conference is held, the press conference is littered with new untruths. My old iPad, I found the emails on as if you can't go on a new device and find old emails. In fact, the old, no problem, my brother. Come with it. Come with it. Ain't no fear on this side. Come with it. So what is, and see, this is it. Let me just say to members of the public, every time we raise these factual issues about issues of governance, multiple members on the governing side comes with threats. That's what they do. One member said, are you sure you want to lay a legitimate document in the House? Because somebody can always come in here and lay a document and say you all receive a bribe. We now have the member for Yamacraw threatening what they would release. We already see you all and how you all are behaving, seeking to intimidate Bahamians. And so that's what you said.
Yeah, the chair recognized the honorable member for Yamacraw.
Mr. Deputy, the good member from Marco City is probably trying to bait myself into his level of debate. And by him suggesting that there was any threat is untrue again. The member has a difficulty with the truth. And I would ask him to refrain that the member from Yamacraw said anything about threatening to release any documents. He made a statement that should be withdrawn, saying that he has items on his iPad. And therefore, if this member is going to continue, because he's jumped, Mr. Speaker, they're trying to shout me down. But if he is going to jump topics again, from the debate for the entire morning, and we have to indulge, then we must shoot down these accusations and are true. That the member from Marco City continues to act. He is speaking to the cameras and just spewing any manner of evil.
Thank you, honorable member.
Coming from Yamacraw too, we know what happened like before the election.
The time.
That's not right.
Mr. Deputy.
Y'all need to behave.
Mr. Deputy, unless he is prepared to withdraw that, indicating Yamacraw, in particular, the people of Yamacraw listening.
The member of Parliament for Yamacraw.
He's already a junior member of Parliament, right? A member that Yamacraw sent here, right? He is disrespectful in his submission. And he continued to go down the road, and I asked the Speaker to please strike from the record what the member said in his rant about threats, or the member should do the honorable thing if he has it in him and withdraw.
Honorable member from Marco City,
Never.
are you going to withdraw?
Mr. Deputy, by way of you, I'd like to ask the member for Yamacraw, did he indicate that if you don't refrain, he has stuff that he could release from the email?
No, I did not. And the Hansard is very clear. He should just withdraw and do the honorable thing because he is going down the road.
Can't speak to that if you're sitting down. So, Mr. Deputy, no, I don't intend to withdraw. This side has consistently. Certainly not
The
you.
chair recognized the honorable member for Marco City.
So, Mr. Deputy, no, I do not intend to withdraw. I wish, however, to lay a document, I wish to lay a document.
The chair recognized the honorable member for Exome and Ragged Island.
Mr. Deputy, this is an honorable place. One member has asserted
that another member has threatened him. The member for Yamacraw has gone on record as indicating that there was no such threat, and he has asked for the member who asserted this to withdraw it, and failing to do so, he has asked the chair to expunge it, Mr. Deputy. This should not be taken lightly.
Thank you, Honorable Member. We will have that stricken from the record. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Mr. Deputy, members opposite, each time we seek to raise an issue, they wish to remind us of the power that they have and what they can do in the event that we persist. That's essentially the way in which they function. And so it is not my intention, it is not our intention to bow to that kind of pressure. Mr. Deputy, let me read into the record. Recently, a press conference held by the member for Fort Charlotte, he asserted that two things that we wish to correct. One is the member has indicated that the IDB supported the position taken by the member for Fort Charlotte, the member for Cat Island, Rumkins and Salvador, and by the financial secretary. I want to be clear. They asserted that the IDB supported the position. We say on the record that we do not believe that this administration is being truthful about the IDB's recommendation of the program. And we challenge the member for Fort Charlotte or the hedging program, the BPL hedging program. And so we ask that
the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for West.
Allow me to complete the statement. And so, Mr. Deputy, we ask the member for Fort Charlotte and the member for Cat Island, Rumkins, and Salvador to lay proof that the IDB concurred with what was asserted by the member for Fort Charlotte, that the IDB did not support the program. That's one. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, in correspondence that the member for Fort Charlotte is written to, it is made clear that there is no cost associated with the execution of the hedge program that will be left with BPL. It is a pass-through cost that goes to the consumer. Yet, the member of Parliament for Fort Charlotte, as well as the present leadership of BPL, continues to tell the dailies that there's a $40 million charge associated with executing the hedge, and therefore it was not taken on board. It is untrue. There is no such cost as asserted by the member or by the present leadership of BPL. It is untrue.
Mr. Deputy, we again ask your guidance on relevance, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, we're asking for your guidance on relevance because we are discussing the investment fund. We're repealing the sovereign wealth fund for the new investment fund. And we wish to focus on that, Mr. Deputy. And so we seek your guidance and relevance.
Honorable Member, are you tying that into this bill?
Mr. Deputy, when we talk about energy, that's one of the natural resources of the Bahamas. And here's a group that wishes the public to take them seriously as overseers of our natural resources when we have a clear example of their abuse of the authority they have managing one of the single largest resource that we have in country, which is energy. And so Mr. I fail to understand the point that they're seeking to raise. And so again, this Parliament, the members of the public have been misled, even in the press conference. And so here's the point I wish to raise. The acting Prime Minister should say, once I'm through, whether or not he is content to have a member of his team on more than 8 occasions on his feet in this Parliament be disingenuous, loose with the truth or on the facts. Is that typical of this administration? This is the same administration that talk about transparency. This is the same administration that talk about the importance of your word being your bond. But now we have a minister in that administration with huge responsibilities consistently misleading the Bahamian people. And this is the same group that love to say to us, you were in cabinet when this happened and that happened. Well, let me say to them, you are in the House of Assembly and bomb on the table for the public being misled. And now you are quiet. Mums is the word. You are not prepared to get up and stand up for the Bahamian people. But it may be the case, Mr. Deputy, because that this is a collective decision made by them. This is probably a collective decision made by this administration, and they bear the responsibility of the $100+ million that have been squandered. All of them bear that responsibility together. Mr. Deputy, I wrap up by once again coming back to the bill before us, and I ask that this administration engage in public discussions so that we could clearly understand to what extent are they going to fund, and let me go to fisheries. In the fisheries bill, one of the requirements of the fisheries bill is that we do a valuation, that is, we quantify all of the resources in the sea, under the sea, or on the seabed, under the seabed, etc. What we know is sorely lacking is sufficient resources for the minister who has responsibility for fisheries, as well as the minister who has responsibility for the environment. They lack the resources. They did under us, and they do so, and right now they lack the resources in order to do the appropriate valuation. Well, the same thing is true about most of the natural resources that we have. Whether you're dealing with the mangoes, whether you're dealing with salt, whether you're dealing with aragonite or sand, whether you're dealing with the airspace, there is a need for us to, one, list all of those natural resources, quantify those natural resources, decide jointly on what the value is of each of those resources, and then we have to decide on what framework we will use for each of those resources, because one size does not fit all in terms of how you utilize the resources. Some of the resources can be depleted. So you deal with those resources different than others. So the airspace will not be depleted. How do you treat with that versus how do you treat with aragonite? How many licenses would you be able to give out for that particular resource that is finite? While it is reproduced over a very long period of time. And if the government, through the selection of whoever is managing these resources, does not take into consideration the difference between the types of natural resources, then we run the risk of not having some of them available for future generations. And all I'm saying is in this debate, this 30-minute debate that this administration is now committed to, because we know it is possible for our individual contributions to be longer than 30 minutes. But your administration loves to duck and dodge. This is why. Listen, we can wait. I'm gonna have discussions. I'm gonna have discussions in future on this in greater detail when you are ready to have a real debate on this. What you're looking for is that box you all have. Tick in these boxes that we brought this to the House and this is passed. Yeah. We are going to get it right when we come to office. That's right. When we come to office, this bill is not going to be the bill. It won't be the same sovereign wealth bill. It wouldn't be this. Because this is woefully inadequate. It is woefully lacking. And so we intend to modify this that has been brought so that we can do it right. You have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to engage intelligent Bahamians who know better than every one of us in here how we ought to identify tangible and intangible resources in order for us to make the right decision in how we monetize it, how we benefit from it, how we increase Bahamian ownership. This bill, unfortunately, does not accomplish that. So I close with this, Mr. Deputy. We are here talking about natural resources while people are digging up the property, agriculture land, crown land in the care of the Treasury, all over New Providence and other islands with very little action by this administration. If you're serious about protecting natural resources, why don't you? Oh, of course, it didn't just start. It didn't just start. But the question is, why are you not doing anything about it? Now we could go to those locations and drop you a pin location so you could drive out there in order to see those locations. But clearly that's beneath you. Clearly that's beneath you. And so yeah, agriculture land as well. Yeah, except in North Andros, we took the necessary steps to deal with people squatting on agriculture land in North Andros. And so let me say this as we close. One of the reasons, Mr. Deputy, we are having this discussion today is this administration is tired of being whipped by Bahamians, figuratively speaking, whipped by Bahamians who do not believe that they have a commitment to transparency. One of the reasons we are here is that they are responding, which is about time, to public pressure to have a discussion about our patrimony that they have not paid enough attention to. And so what we want to make sure is when they finalize the various structures, that we do not have one company. We came to the House the last time and heard names of companies that had already been pre-selected. We want to make sure that this administration, who hasn't revealed 10% of the contracts that they have signed for over a year, we don't want them to come back to us and tell us who is managing the natural resources of the Bahamas. We believe they have people in mind already who they wish to give, who divvy up the various natural resources to. We believe that they have folks already who they have determined will control the trading and the management of these natural resources.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Leader of opposition is being most irresponsible in his allegations, Mr. Deputy, and I asked him to desist from doing it. Earlier, we talked about the process and the appropriate protocols for selecting service providers. This still exists. The same protocols that were under the administration of Kalani still exists in a cabinet where he served. So this is it's disingenuous, and putting this on the record is irresponsible. And these innuendos, Mr. Deputy, is completely unacceptable, and it's not honorable.
Thank you, honorable member.
Mr. Deputy, I would take the member for Exuma and Ragged Island seriously if he had spoken up in this parliament just once. I need to finish the statement, Mr. Deputy.
You have 8 seconds.
I want to
finish.
I'm not yielding under any circumstance. Mr. Deputy, I have not finished the statement.
Okay.
I'm not yielding to him.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma.
Asking the member to withdraw the innuendos or that they be expunged, Mr. Deputy.
Now why it can't be withdrawn.
Honorable member, are you going to withdraw?
Mr. Deputy, the member for Exuma has never once come in this house after we have said collectively that they have given out hundreds of contracts for hundreds of millions of dollars in violation of the procurement law. We do not believe for a moment he is in a position. He doesn't have the moral authority to talk about innuendos when he hasn't followed the law in simply indicating what contracts they've given out, to whom, what is the scope of works, what is the value. So how is it that I'm going to know that in this bill, we are clear on exactly who is going to be in charge of managing these natural resources? We do not know. They don't have a pattern of behavior of selecting companies in the most transparent way. So how do they want us to make an exception now to believe they can do it in this case? I do not believe him.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Mr. Speaker, I reiterate, this is an honorable house. We are elected by the people we serve to be honorable. It is irresponsible and disrespectful for the member to make unfounded suggestions of impropriety of the government. And I ask, if he fails to be honorable and he fails to do the honorable thing, in withdrawing those innuendos, Mr. Deputy, that they be expunged.
Honorable member, are you going to withdraw?
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to you.
So, Mr.
Are you going to withdraw?
Mr. Deputy, let me help the member for Exuma.
Okay, we'll have that expunged from the records.
But let me put it this way.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Mr. Deputy, let me for the Bahamian people, let me say this by way of you. In the absence of this government revealing to us, despite the many ways we've asked them to let us know, why are they not following the procurement process? Why are they not revealing who they have given contracts to? Why are they not telling us what is the amount of the contract, the duration of the contract? It is reasonable to ask the question, have they already decided on who will be managing the natural resources of the Bahamian people? It is a reasonable question given the background of the behavior of the Cooper Davis administration, Mr. Speaker. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I want to close I just need 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker. I just need 2 minutes.
Yeah, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
I just need 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
The member has made allegations, Mr. Deputy. He's made allegations. He's finished his speech, and he sat. Maybe he forgot that he sat, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, he made allegations against the government of impropriety. Unless he is prepared to be decent and honorable and withdraw, I ask that you expunge those references, Mr. Deputy.
They are expunged. The chair recognizes Marco City. You're going to wrap up. We have 2 minutes.
Yes, I am, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy.
Honorable members.
Mr. Deputy.
Okay, since you know that, you don't have to repeat it. Just leave it alone. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Mr. Deputy, I wish to wrap up on a point that I raised earlier, and the reason I'm raising it is there are a lot of Bahamians right now who are anxiety-stricken because of the manner in which this administration is intimidating ordinary Bahamians. Intimidating ordinary Bahamians. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have had in the Free National Movement, we have had to have attorneys speak with any number of persons who have been called, requested to go to the police station, to...
Yeah. The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama.
Mr. Deputy, but it must be relevant to the matter we are debating. But as the member now wishes to accuse the government of intimidating, that is a very serious allegation, very serious suggestion. And I don't think the member should be allowed to, and we ask him to withdraw that unless he can prove, unless you have evidence to prove otherwise, and specifically name anyone on the side or a member of the government who's done so.
Thank you, honorable member.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the message is simply this. No government has a right to go to people's homes, take unsuspecting residents to police stations, to go on fishing expeditions under multiple... Do you want me to phrase it this way? I could phrase it a different way, and I could be more direct. So, no, let me.
Yeah. The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama.
Suggesting, Marco City, that the government of the Bahamas, which you're suggesting is the government,
no government should be in the business of going to citizens' homes, inviting them, in some cases, to the police station and otherwise, on a fishing expedition. We have had to dispatch multiple attorneys to advise persons of their rights because they feel that they are being targeted. That they are being targeted. And so I want to say to those persons who fall in that category, we will not be quiet about government officials not speaking clearly in this place about what the rights of citizens are and seeking to intimidate persons. And that is a concern, that is a very serious concern that we have. And some members here are fully aware of what I'm
Marco
talking
Sido,
about.
thank you. Thank you, Honorable Member.
Deputy, with the member completed his contribution and the additional minutes given him. Just for the record, Mr. Deputy, that the government of the Bahamas respects the human rights of every Bahamian. And we will not, and the government does not, and has not given any instructions to anyone, and no member of this government has gone to any household seeking to advise or to obstruct or take from a home, abstract from a home, any individual in dealing with any matter, Mr. Deputy. And so we want for the record, the government of the Bahamas respects the rights of Bahamians, and we will not violate those rights.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many?
That the government was in union busting and all manner of union they have opinions, all manner of opinions about the government's relationship with labor. For the record, over the last 18 months, the government would have signed 10 union agreements. 10. The former administration and these and many of these agreements range from 2018, 2017 expiration. They have spent their entire term I can't get distracted by the background.
Stay focused.
Let me say in the spirit. The former administration has spent the entire term without meeting and treating with various unions. And I want to put on record that the government, this administration, has never engaged with any form of union busting or otherwise. They have signed none in comparison, especially some of the major unions, like the teachers' unions, both of them, and we signed a new one, which is 3. And also, we have BECOWU, BEMU, BUT, that's the 3. We have BNU, we have one with the Ministry of, we have 2 with Health. We have Customs and Immigration, 888W. We have the Bridge Authority, BCPOU, and ZNS, NIB, Public Managers Union. This government has made a commitment from its inception that it cares about the workers of this country. So not only signing these agreements for them to have increases, not only this Christmas and going forward, but we have increased minimum wage and negotiated that with the unions in order to reach to a livable wage. So for any kind of insinuation, the former administration should be apologizing to the people of this country and the workers of this country that they have neglected them and their families for their entire term in governance, and should thank this government for stepping up to the plate to do it in just a space of a year. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Barnabas.
Mr. Deputy, last week we had this discussion, right? The Tribune article says, stop union busting. Stop union busting, plain and simple. December 1st, 2022. And so all this talk as if the opposition is trying to make these things up. This is the Bahamas Public Services Union. It says stop union busting. So no matter how much verbal gymnastics they try on that side, this is what the union has said. So stop union busting.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Central and Saudi Lutra.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Let me get to the bill. let me get to the bill.
Let's have a sensible.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I stand in this House as always, grateful for the opportunity bestowed upon me by the great constituents of Central and South Eleuthera as well as my wife of 10 years who'll be celebrating her birthday this week. I going home, yeah, I going home. Yes, sir, we have water, and I can speak to that. No, we have water. They have reposed their confidence in me to improve the quality of life on the island of Eleuthera for its residents and visitors. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the challenges that are experienced by Eleutherians are not unique to other islands or the capital. However, the frequency of these untimely occurrences creates frustrations and interrupt lives. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to publicly thank yourself, the Chairman of Water and Sewage Corporation, and your team, as well as the Honorable Alfred Sayers, the Minister of Works and member for Fort Charlotte, for their unwavering commitment to the residents to ensure that the water was restored expeditiously, because I am sure that they are happy that they. I am sure that you remain committed and corrected the decades-long issue,
Honorable
of
members,
water
order.
in Eleuthera.
Decades now.
I wish to thank the residents of Eleuthera, and especially my constituents, who called to advise me of the issues, and they continue to place their confidence in me as we work together to further develop the constituency. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to also recognize the family of the late Ronald Taylor, a family man, a community man, and a fisherman like myself. I, along with my Eleuthera cabinet members, were able to attend his homegoing service this past weekend, and I extend sincere condolences to Mrs. Taylor, an educator of over 40 years, their children, especially Justin, who has been working closely with the Ministry of Agriculture through BAMSI to bring much-needed improvements to farming in this country as we work towards a more food-secure nation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is important for us as Bahamians to recognize that we are a country of merely 50 years as an independent nation. Our leaders haven't gotten all right, but we must also recognize that each administration has acted in a manner that they deemed appropriate to strengthen our country and solidify our national identity. Additionally, every administration creates a plan that speaks to the times we live in. 20 years ago, few would have wagered their last to declare that currency could be digitized. Only a few decades past did we truly begin to realize that we could monetize our natural resources and create our own wealth, which led to the creation of the idea of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. While it was spoken about widely, it did not come into effect until 2016. Interestingly enough, times have changed even more since then, and thus we are at this pivotal junction today. We are taking the establishment of the Sovereign Wealth Fund a step further, and no doubt generations later will not only benefit from the changes made today, but they will be able to build upon the foundation of the National Investment Fund for the Bahamas. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our Prime Minister and member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador continues to ensure internationally that we establish our country as not just a highly sought-after tourist destination with beautiful stretches of pink sand beaches and the home of the friendliest people in the world with a rich and vibrant cultural heritage, but he has caused the world to see that our rich carbon deposits and our natural derivatives is one of the rarest on the planet, with the ability to help the world maintain a healthy balance. While big nations continue to grow, the rate of their growth continues to put small countries, and especially those of us near to and a part of the Caribbean, at great risk of rising sea levels, stronger natural disasters, and a myriad of adverse effects of climate change. Mr. Deputy Speaker, while many assess the validity of climate change and predict many negative outcomes, our Prime Minister has utilized this opportunity to advocate for immediate changes in how our neighbors conduct themselves, to minimize the impact of climate change for small nations such as the Bahamas, and he has offered a strategy that Bahamians can benefit from utilizing the very resources that nature has provided. This opportunity can indeed create access funding for our country's development, as we recognize that there must be some tweaks and adjustments made to the Sovereign Wealth Fund. This will help to make financial sense for the benefit of all Bahamians. It is for this reason, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we seek today to make the necessary changes to make sound investments. Our deposit into the consolidated fund will not generate a rate of return for us to allow our country to pay its debts, and it will not allow us access to investment opportunities to develop our industries that may need serious capital injections like agriculture and also the further development of our family islands. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we know that agriculture has been on the back burner for many decades. It is only now that the world finds itself in a peculiar place that we have placed a considerable focus on redeveloping this industry toward an aggressive goal of food security. I support the establishment of this national investment bill as agriculture stands to benefit greatly. Across the Bahamas, and even our regional and international partners share many of the same frustrations in the agriculture sector. Climate change has and continues to adversely affect the lives of farmers. From hurricanes and major tropical storms to pestilences and dust storms, or the aftermath of a storm, and the difficulties have left farmers unable to access crop insurance or otherwise. Mr. Deputy Speaker, over the years, many farmers have experienced great loss due to unforeseen challenges. Imagine investing in planting acres of pineapples, toting water, fertilizer, protecting your investment from raccoons and humans, 18 months in, and a hurricane or tropical storm destroys your entire crop. How does one recuperate from that? A considerable capital investment out of pocket, no insurance, no bank loan, no help. The establishment of a national investment fund, there are great opportunities for agricultural sub-funds that can possibly protect our farmers through incentives and programs, and also major funding programs that can move our farmers from small farmers into large commercial farmers with the potential for export and to provide opportunities of increased production against unforeseen circumstances. Mr. Deputy Speaker, currently the Ministry of Agriculture, Marine Resources, and Family Island Affairs, along with the Small Business Development Center, through its Access Accelerator program, offers farmers and fishermen grant funding for the establishment of businesses in the sectors and the funding for existing businesses to be able to increase capacity. No amount of funding could ever be enough to subsidize these industries wholly. However, we see the need to offer some financial assistance, and we encourage the recipients of those grants, which will be named shortly, to utilize the funding to the best of their abilities. Additionally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have initiated a pilot grant program offered for the further development of an agriculture and aquaculture sector by providing funding specific to projects that offer climate-smart initiatives and alternatives to investing and growing both sectors. We are pleased to announce that there are several beneficiaries of this grant already named, piloting programs that reduce dependency of fossil fuels that are growing food in large quantities utilizing non-traditional methods. We see our young creatives as the future of these industries, aligning technology and innovation to boost food security. We are working on formalizing this grant opportunity to engage our youth, to engage our women into meaningful action that will benefit our country and to provide the stability through food security that we seek to achieve. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would also like to point out that other successful national investment funds or the use of sovereign wealth funds have been utilized by governments throughout the world. Specifically, the Food and Agriculture Organization in its 2010 publication listed only 18 agricultural investment funds that were created. However, at the publication of a white paper on the implementation of agriculture investment funds in 2018, an additional 45 agriculture investment funds were established as there exists an increased pressure to supply the world with requisite amount of food. The paper cited that while there still exists a significant amount of risk involved in farming, governments and private corporations are creating more ways to invest in agriculture as the demand seeds fit to outweigh the risks. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the challenges that we face in the Bahamas are not unique in comparison to farming communities globally. There has been a significantly less investment in agriculture globally due to risk factors, as mentioned earlier. However, reputable organizations as FAO have dedicated time, resources, and research into developing these and similar investment strategies because food production and food security is of utmost importance. The proposed bill being debated today mimics closely the management structure and the strategy that is being undertaken, as is these 63 investment funds and sub-funds globally. Mr. Deputy Speaker, to elaborate a bit further, India has also embarked on a similar program and investment strategy designed to establish capital projects throughout the country. The structure and the chairman of the board, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is very similar to ours as we adopt international standards and best practices. I heard the member for East Grand Bahama speak about how the chairman was appointed. Well, in India, in 2015, the India's finance minister announced the creation of a national investment fund and infrastructure fund. This fund, too, was appointed by the minister, and the chairman was appointed by the minister. And when initially it started, the same fund started with around 450 million, and now, in the same and similar structure to ours, the same fund manages roughly $4.34 billion in funds. So the structure is very similar internationally, and I'm sure that Bahamians in this country can do the same thing and ensure that we are successful with the adaptation of this fund. I would also like to make the point, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that our neighbors to the south, Jamaica, has also developed a Jamaica social investment fund that is utilized for social programs. So this isn't new. And we are adopting similar practices across the globe, not just in the region, to ensure that Bahamians are able to explore the same type of investment that other countries do as well. Mr. Deputy Speaker, both of these countries are utilizing these vehicles, offering a transparent approach to provide for the accountable management of these investment funds. As one of the leading countries in the world with a thriving financial sector, I am sure the Bahamas is able to implement this investment bill with a degree of specialization that is unmatched. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to draw your attention to a portfolio under my remit that can also see great benefit from the establishment of the National Investment Fund. Before taking office and having a seat in this honorable House, myself, along with a team chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister and other members across from this nation, developed a plan that is a part of this administration's blueprint for change that speaks to the development of family islands, ensuring that development on the whole is inclusive of every island. In our budget debate, the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador spoke of a family island development fund with a capital injection of $200 million. This legislation is imperative for the proper management of these funds to be allocated to ensure we develop the family islands. As we all know, money is needed, and to be allocated, it must be done properly, ensure that the family islands receive the attention that they need. Additionally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in my ministry, we also create a team of professionals with extensive knowledge in local government to assess the current legislation and establish a white paper on how we can transform local government, giving districts the opportunity to generate income to sustain the councils and increase their ability to improve the way on how they live locally. I must commend the team at local government headed by Acting Director Neil Campbell, the special task force led by Alexander Flowers, former administrator Mr. Cunningham, for their diligence, their patience, and their effort invested in meeting their mandate on time. I wish to advise this House, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that just this morning, a copy of the completed document was presented to me and the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry, Mr. David Cates, for our review. As promised, the team completed this report on and before deadline.
Yeah.
This bill for an act to repeal and replace the Sovereign Wealth Act 2016 and to provide the establishment of a national investment fund for a purpose specific in this act. Family Islands can see a great benefit as the investment is structured to be properly guided by a board of qualified professionals to ensure that the funds invested are maintained and utilized for the specific purpose of Family Island development. Additionally, any revenue generated through the implementation of the revisions to the Local Government Act must also have a depository structure and mechanism to be realized. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is yet another progressive and transformative step in the right direction to reimagining our wealth. As we approach our golden anniversary, how timely is it that we tackle the biggest hurdle to becoming a true independent nation by improving on a platform designed to uplift our financial status and thus improving the lives of Bahamians, not just in New Providence, but throughout our country. Mr. Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the hardworking people throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, who are farmers, who are fishermen, and those residing in many family islands, I stand in support for this bill, and I look forward to the proper establishment and execution of the National Investment Fund for a purpose specific in this act.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Anne's.
It would be appropriate now, Mr. Deputy, for us to take the lunch break.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the House be suspended to 3 p.m. As many are in favor will remain seated, those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of the House stands suspended to 3 p.m.
Deputy.